Welcome to Circle Back to You podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wilson. Our guest today is Victoria Rivera, wellness psychotherapist. She empowers you to go from burnout to achieve optimal mental, emotional, and physical health. She's dedicated to fostering collaboration within teams, boosting job satisfaction, and promoting optimal work productivity through comprehensive wellness initiatives. Welcome, everybody, to Circle Back to You podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wilson. Today, I'm back with Victoria Rivera. How you doing, Victoria?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Good. So this week will be a continuation of what we were talking about last week, the steps to ending burnout with some practical things that you can incorporate into your daily life.
Yes, definitely. So just to recap, last time we talked about what burnout actually was. And do you remember what it is, Jason?
Well, it's a combination of things, but I figured out that it's not just burnout that you experience from work. It can come from harmful relationships. It can come from a lot of different things, but definitely being around people that are toxic can add to burnout as well.
Yes, definitely. And we talked about how the World Health Organization before COVID in 2019 identified burnout as a syndrome that we get from work stress, chronic work stress that's unmanaged. And there's three main diagnostic kind of characteristics. One is cynicism, just not feeling like you're interested in the work that you're doing, decrease in productivity, and then exhaustion. And so we all know with COVID, exhaustion became like work, home, everything, just being around in the world, like exhausted. And really what that is just your nervous system being burnt out and overwhelmed. So it's chronic stress that hasn't been managed. And so we are going to be talking about some practical things that you could do to kind of manage that. So just to recap again, what I talked about last week was really building like a level of awareness. So everybody had homework, and I hope everybody did it, which was like understand. I hope you did, Jason. Right? Is understanding where are you getting your stress from, and how it is impacting you. And I think like a lot of times, it's interesting that you said like we were talking about work. A lot of that in terms of burnout, but also from relationships. And sometimes people don't even really realize, they can be in a toxic relationship or a relationship where somebody's taking up a lot of energy and effort. And that actually can burn you out too. We don't really talk too much about this, but there is in terms of the psychological big five, there's these characteristics that we all kind of have, and introversion and extroversion is one of them, and we're all kind of on a spectrum of that. And if you're more introverted and you have to be doing presentations and engaging, or your partner is extroverted and wants to go out all the time, like that takes up a lot of energy and effort, and that actually could lead to feelings of burnout. So burnout is really kind of encompassing of all of these things. So it's really important to just have an awareness, or if you are experiencing burnout and stress, and what that like looks like for you, and then where it's coming from. So that was your homework last time. And any thoughts about that before we move to?
Yeah. I was just going to make a comment about that.
Sure.
So when it comes to chronic stress, I really don't have that right now. Thank God.
For you.
If I do, though, it's usually when I'm like in the midst of organizing a huge event like Freedom Fight Expo.
Yes.
Where, I'm in charge of a lot of different aspects of the planning of the event. So in that case, yeah, I do have some stress, but it's not chronic. It's not something that's reoccurring, that is unaddressed.
Right. Well, you know what I call that? I call that like kind of college stress. Do you remember when we were in school and we had papers? And I think we talked about this last time. We have papers that were due during the end of the year or in the middle of the semester, mid-semester, and you had papers. You had like quizzes or exams, and you had to put in so much energy and effort to study and to get everything done. And
Yep.
then you had a fall time, so that a time where you can just like sit and relax because you did everything. The problem is now is you can't really do that with family. Like you can't
No.
tell your kids and your partner, hey, look, you just really stressed me out for these past couple of weeks. I am going to take some time off, maybe a week or a couple of days. You can do that, but it's very hard to do that. And the same thing with work. A lot of us go from projects to projects, or we have simultaneous projects going on, and it's so challenging to have that like increase in stress and overwhelm for such a long period of time. So that's that chronic stress. And also I would say, Jason, and sometimes people don't really realize this, and this is why I wanted everybody to do the homework, is that you may be under chronic stress and you might not even realize it because you don't feel it as much because your baseline is so high in terms of your tolerance. And that's for my lawyers in particular, people who are in medicine, doctors, nurses, like I see that a lot with those professions, but also in finance and in many other professions. It's just like they're on like kind of constant like fight or flight and feeling overwhelmed, and sometimes don't even realize it until eventually they do burn out. Yeah.
Well, in those cases, do they have like a crisis, which lets them know that they're burnout, or what happens usually?
Well, it's so interesting. So your body keeps the score in many ways, and you might notice that you have some autoimmune issues kind of creeping up, stomach issues, issues around your skin, medical issues that you don't, kind of coming from nowhere. But more importantly, you probably see it more in your sleep. Your sleep
Okay.
would probably be pretty bad or not consistent. And it's kind of crazy because there's some people who really like, they tell me, oh yeah, I only get like 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours of sleep. And they're chronically exhausted and tired, and yet they're still able to work the hours that they work. And it's quite amazing. But
Right.
eventually it's going to catch up.
Well, when it comes to skin issues, are we talking about acne or something else?
Well, it could be acne, it could be eczema, it could be any issue. Your skin is really sensitive to the food that you eat. It's sensitive to the external environment, but also the internal environment. And so, if you have a lot of stress hormones that are going on, like cortisol and adrenaline all the time, what's happening is you're in that fight or flight. And when you're in that fight or flight, initially your immune system kicks in. But if you're under chronic stress, your fight or flight is on all the time. So your immune system is kicking in, but it's losing steam, and then it's not it's not able to like kind of rest and relax. And so it'll have like reactions to whatever is going on. So it'll have like a stress reaction. A lot of times people will have hives when they're stressed and overwhelmed, or they'll have, again, like eczema or dermatitis issues and stuff like that. And so that really is a sign that your immune system is probably feeling a bit overwhelmed because you're in that stress state. And when we're in that fight or flight state, the other piece of that, and this is, a lot of the work that I do when I'm working with patients, but also working with clients and employees around employee wellness, is helping them to understand that your body functions in a certain way. So having that stress response is really important if you need it, right? Like, so when you're preparing for your presentations and your projects, you need that steam, but then you need to be able to like kind of pull it back, and you need to have that rest and relaxation. And that part of this nervous system is called the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. So that's that rest, digest. It's kind of, your ability to like be meditative, to sleep, to be in a deep sleep. But when we're on that fight or flight, that's more of the activation of your body into like, okay, hypervigilance and awareness mode, where you're trying to like kind of find, okay, what is the thing that I have to be aware of or scared of? What do I have to fight? What do I have to kind of like run from? And it's, it's interesting because it's such a primitive part of how we are, like as humans. We're not necessarily like running from lions or from snakes like we used to, but but our body is reacting as if we are when we get an email from our boss, or when we, have to do a presentation and feel anxious and stressed about it, or when we're just kind of in the streets of New York. We're like kind of in that fight or flight. And so a lot of us are in that often. And so when we talk about this concept of burnout, really it is being overwhelmed with your senses and being in that fight or flight all the time from whatever the stressors are that are going on in your life.
Great. But I can imagine living in a city like New York, uh, unless you work at home, and you have to deal with that traffic all day. I mean, that can be stressful too.
There's a lot going on in New York. And
Yeah.
it's funny. So I've been living in New York for a long time, and I'm not from New York originally. I'm from upstate New York. And
Okay.
it's very different. It's
Yeah.
much quieter in upstate New York. However, what I've noticed is that it's kind of almost like, what I was talking about, people being more energetic and being introverted or extroverted. We kind of have like a nervous system preference too. And you might see this like in kids or in infants, like that some kids just have like a lot of energy and are
Yeah.
really like activated all the time. And some kids, they need to kind of have downtime. They don't want to be bothered so much. So I often say, if you live in New York, probably the reason why, especially if you're from not from the city, coming here, there's something about the energy of the city that kind of keeps you in fight or flight too, that you like.
Yeah.
There's a familiarity with it that you like. And I've had to contend with this for myself, because I noticed that like there is something kind of calming around the chaos. And that's
Really?
like, yeah. But you put me in the the country, and I'm scared because it's pitch black and I can't see or hear anything. And I think like that would get my nervous system probably more activated than it is in the city.
Wow. Okay. It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah. But I hope one day, as when I get older and I'll like move out of the city at some point, that I'll feel much more safe and comfortable in the country.
Right.
But that's just something that I noticed. A lot of the patients and employees that like move here from the Midwest, or like even from California, they love the energy of the city. And I think a
Hmm.
part of it is it's kicking in their fight or flight, and there's something about that feels very familiar.
Okay.
Yeah. And we want, I mean, and I think that there's a lot of deeper kind of issues around trauma and stuff like that, which potentially could be impacting it. But
Probably so.
also temperament too. Like I said, some kids are just born like, having all this energy and really wanting to like go out there and like experience things. So, so well,
Okay.
having said that, so now that we know that there's like this energy, there's this fight or flight system that is kicked in for you when you are burnt out. What has happened is that you're totally burnt out from that system, and that system needs to really rest. And it's so challenging to rest it if you aren't able to take time off of work, or like I said, take time off of your family, off your life. I mean, oftentimes I've had to help patients and employees get on to like a little temporary disability when they really have burnout, because you really do need to just rest and relax and get your baseline from like up here to a little bit lower, as much as one can. And that really is, again, like implementing that relaxation and that parasympathetic part of the nervous system. So if you are truly burnt out, my first suggestion would be is to see if you can get some time off and just decompress. And then we should do another talk actually around kind of setting values and living towards your values, because oftentimes, a lot of times when people are stressed and overwhelmed and burnt out, they have to reevaluate their life, and they have to reevaluate like if what they're doing is in alignment with their
Right.
their meaning and their purpose. And that's like a whole nother talk. So I would just want to kind of put that in people's mind, set that aside. If you are really totally burnt out, you may need to take like a break. And what we know is people after COVID, the number one reason why people are leaving their jobs or taking medical leaves is for mental health.
Hmm. Yeah.
Surpassed physical health by, I think, 10 times or something crazy like that. Yeah. And then we also know that depression is the number one reason for disability worldwide, and why people don't work is depression. And 1 out of 4 employees actually have a mental health issue that's diagnosable and needs to be treated. So that burnout all impacts and is intertwined in all of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but for those of us who are working day to day, want to prevent burnout or have a little bit of burnout or kind of in this fight or flight, there are some things that you can do that are really helpful. Now, I'm going to list a lot of things, but I want you to understand you do not have to do all of these things. These are just, it's doing like something, what's that quote around being like 1% better, or doing something different, one thing different. And that starts to kind of have a domino effect, and you starts to kind of like change your life. There are these things called keystone habits that if you implement, it starts to like have a domino effect in your life. And so one keystone habit that I think is really important is sleep. And I'm sure everybody knows about this. And
Yeah.
I don't want to give too, I don't want to give too much. Everybody knows it. The stats is like, 30% of Americans don't sleep well. And some of the other Americans really like have erratic sleep, or they're sleeping, but they're not like going in deep sleep. So my suggestion for people is really take a look at your sleep. You're supposed to be sleeping 7 to 9 hours, but some people feel actually okay with just 6 hours.
Yeah.
And there's 2 issues that happen with sleep. One is people have trouble falling asleep because they can't turn their minds off. And then the other thing is people will fall asleep, but they wake up at 2, 3 in the morning, they go to the bathroom, or their brain wakes them up, and all of a sudden everything is like a problem. So they start to so their fire alarm, their amygdala, which is a part of our brain that's like the fire alarm, is kind of going off and thinking about all the things that are going wrong in their life, thinking about that email that they sent to the client, or that conversation that didn't go that well with the boss, or maybe it did go well, but your mind starts saying, oh, but he kind of looked at me funny. Yeah. So what's really happening, what we know science-wise, is that your brain part of it is sleeping, which is the prefrontal cortex. And that's our cognitive part that's able to kind of rationalize and say, hey, look, things are okay. Like, it's fine. Just relax, go back to sleep. That part is actually resting. But the amygdala isn't. And that makes sense evolutionary wise, because as we were, in tribes and caves, in the middle of the night, if there was a predator, what had to kick in? Our fight or flight. And I have a real quick story. I had this happened a couple of months ago, and it's so embarrassing, but I want to share because I think it's helpful.
Okay.
In the middle of the night, my carbon monoxide alarm started going off, but it was just going off, beep, beep, beep. And then I was like, oh my God, the carbon monoxide alarm is going off. There must be carbon monoxide in the apartment. I open up my windows and I call 911.
Did you?
I sure did. And so they came, 4 or 5 burly guys, New York City Fire Department, into my apartment. And he tells me, he's like, oh, your battery is dying. The beeping is just your battery is dying. I was mortified. But let me tell you, Jason, there were 2 reasons why this happened. One was several years ago when I was at my mom's place home, we had a carbon monoxide alarm go off, and we all had to go outside. The fire department came, and it was a real issue. It was a real situation. There was carbon monoxide. And had we stayed and had the carbon monoxide, obviously I would not be around right now. So in my brain, my amygdala was awake. And it was like, girl, you know, this situation, this happened before, we need to call 911. And that's what happened is in my rational brain that would have said, well, but the carbon monoxide is not going off like so loud. And it did when, you know, there, like that part was not activated. So sleep is so important because it helps to, you know, relax that cognitive part of your brain because you do need it to rest. But in the middle of the night, when you wake up to use the bathroom or you know, something happens, to get back to sleep, it's harder because your cognitive brain is not online. And so does this like ring true for
Well,
you?
listen, if I was in that situation, I probably would have done the same thing. I mean, that's extremely dangerous.
Right, but the beep was like, if there's a carbon monoxide poisoning going on, it's loud. It's loud and it's beeping consistently. It was just like
Uh,
beep, beep. so it, again, I give myself grace, and I am very happy that they were so gracious with me too.
yeah,
But I think that's just such a great illustration of what's happening while we're sleeping and why it's so difficult for us at 3-4 o'clock in the morning to go back to sleep, because our brain starts thinking about all the things that are going on. So what I tell people and what I do myself if I'm ever in this situation is to listen to a meditation or a yoga nidra or a sleep meditation. And there's a really great like free app that I use all the time. It's called Insight Timer, and they have tons of different sleep meditations.
hmm
What you really need to do is you need to get your brain to be thinking about or focused on the meditation. And usually the meditations will help you with like body scans. So it starts to get your brain to, instead of thinking about the email about with your boss, you know, you're thinking about, oh, your foot, like relaxing your foot, relaxing your ankle, relaxing your leg. So you're really going through that process, and you'll go to bed very, very swiftly. And if you have problems falling asleep, that's also a great trick, is to listen to a sleep meditation. If you have you know, kind of, it's harder for you to really settle down, then elongate the meditation. So they have 30 to 60 minute meditations. They have 5-minute meditations. So really kind of like utilizing that, because really the trick is the biology and the physiology of our brain is activating our body, and we're not able to rest and relax. And we need to get into that relaxed state in order to feel safe to fall asleep.
yeah, I totally agree with you. And I actually use something like that that has affirmations in it. So these meditations last like from 2 to 8 hours, and you know it's the whole night. I recommend something like that rather than waking up in the middle of the night checking your phone
Yes.
for emails and social media notifications. That's bad.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and can I say, so the next piece of that, so sleep and then waking up in the morning and having a good morning routine. So
Yeah.
I had somebody that I worked with, an employee, and the first thing she would do was check her email, work email. She's coming from like a state of sleep to a state of like activation. And we had to work very, very hard to get her to do something different. So we all have a morning routine, and it is so imperative to have a morning routine that starts you off easing into the day instead of like shocking you. So a lot of times my cousin had like this crazy alarm, which I don't know if she's still using it, but like I remember being at her house and we both had to work, and she's like, "Oh, I'll set my alarm." And I was like, "Meh, meh, meh." Oh, and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh no." I was like, "Oh no, we are not doing this." I was like, "Hey, here's what I use. I use these birds and this like lovely sound to just like kind of wake me up so that I'm not in that cortisol kind of state response early in the day, because that actually is unhelpful, and it gets your body in a state of like that fight or flight immediately. And what we need to do is we need to relax into the day, because later on, don't worry, you will get your cortisol release because you will be stressed at work, you'll be
sure.
overwhelmed. And then what we're going to do after is you're going to learn things to decrease your cortisol at night. And so, but what we want to start off is actually having a morning routine. And a lot of it is like kind of having maybe you're doing a meditation in the morning that's kind of like waking you up, or some light stretching or movement. Maybe you're going straight into the shower and like, doing a little bit of a cold water to kind of like a warm water and then cold at the end to kind of get your body up. But you really want to figure out what your routine is now and what do you want to change about that, and particularly in your morning, so that it feels a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more controlled. Now, for those of people who have children, it's a little bit more challenging, and we can kind of help you figure out ways to implement some relaxation with your kids, and that's something that to kind of think about too, is like, how to kind of help your kids wake up too in a non-stress state.
That's great advice.
Yeah, it's hard. So having a good morning routine, and I love what you said about the affirmations. There is this really great book called The Miracle Morning. I think is Hal Elrod, I think, wrote the book. Anyways, he kind of wanted to become a millionaire. Said, what do millionaires do? Well, they all have like a killer morning routine, and he did a compilation of the 5 different things that millionaires are doing to have like a good routine. So he just started doing all of them. And the first is like, movement. We don't have to do any of these if you don't want to, but you can implement 1 or 2 of them in terms of your morning routine. So movement is one, meditation, or just like kind of sitting in silence. Prayer is also similar to that, where you're just kind of allowing yourself to breathe and to just be. Visualization. Right. So visualizing how you want your day to go, visualizing feeling relaxed or feeling like productive and motivated. Affirmations. So what you do at night, you do that in the morning. Journaling is also one of the miracle mornings. And then the other thing that he said is reading. So I think affirmations and visualizations are together. So there's like 5 of them. And so you can pick out one of those to do if you're not already doing. I think a lot of people will just end up like looking at their phone, going and brushing their teeth, getting their coffee, and in a routine that's like kind of mindless. So we want to start implementing some more mindful relaxation techniques and things to do to help you to ease into your day.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I follow Jim Quick. He incorporates an exercise routine with his, which, I'm a proponent of as well.
Yes.
But yeah, the morning routine is a game changer for sure.
It is. And we don't like to hear this. I don't even like this, but the truth is, as humans, we need to have some sort of routine, and we need like guidelines and goalposts. And if we could set that during our weekdays for our work, and have those boundaries of things that we're doing to take care of ourselves, you'll notice a significant decrease in your stress and feelings of overwhelm.
Awesome.
Yeah. So morning routine with some of those suggestions, and then during the day, taking breaks, mental health breaks, seeing if you can get out and walk in nature. That's always great. If you could take a nap, I know that's a little bit of a tricky one, but in the afternoon, a lot of us do have a lull. From 1 to 4 is a nice time to take a nap. Daniel Pink wrote a book called The Science of Perfect Timing. Great book. One of the things that he talks about is how taking a 20 to 25-minute nap is very helpful in getting your brain to reset. So if you're feeling tired or overwhelmed and you just need a break, taking a nap. And one of the things that you could also do is a yoga nidra, which is, again, that kind of like body scan, and the Insight Timer has tons of them. And you can take a few minutes in the afternoon, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just like power down like you would your phone or your computer, and then, set a timer, wake up in 20 minutes, or get out of the yoga nidra in 25 minutes. Don't do any more than half an hour or you'll get groggy. And you will find that actually you will feel really good and you'll have a lot of energy. You don't necessarily have to have that afternoon caffeine coffee, which also adds to our cortisol and our fight or flight.
Well, here in Colombia, that's kind of tough. But,
No.
I do love it. But, I do incorporate like a power nap, you know, maybe 20, 30 minutes, something like that. Those do work.
Yeah, they do. Well, and they're science-based, like, and we know that different tribes, there's another book, Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, a very famous book, and he talks about that people, we'd had biphasic, like, cycles of sleep. So, we'd sleep for a longer period at night, and then we'd have like a little siesta in the afternoon. And in that, like, is so helpful. And look, there's so many cultures that still do that. And
Yeah.
we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves in this country, and it's great in many ways, but it's also, comes at the sacrifice of how we are as human beings and what we actually need to take care of ourselves. And we have to toggle back and forth between that rest and digest and that, like, fight or flight, or that being alert and active. And the problem, I think, for many of us is that we're alert and active in fight or flight like all the time, and don't have these periods of rest like at night, in the morning, and then throughout the day. And that's kind of what we need to start implementing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other, just quick few things, I know that we do have to end, but is nutrition. So many studies around the food that we eat, especially the food that have additives, preservatives, that are processed, how much that impacts our mental health and well-being, particularly our anxiety and depression. And so eating whole foods as much as you can. If your grandmother or great grandmother doesn't recognize it, it's probably not real food, but it really is about, like, kind of doing everything as naturally as we can possibly do, as we were before, because
Yeah.
our bodies haven't changed, but our environment has significantly changed. And this is why we're all feeling this overwhelm and stress and in fight or flight. So, and I mean, just the other thing too, and I know people don't really want to, like, talk about this too, is time management. Is, you will find, if you do a little bit of homework for yourself, you might be spending more time on your phone than you think you are, more time watching Netflix than you think you are. And I totally get it, because a part of what it does is it helps you to feel a little bit numb. You feel like you're resting and and relaxing, but you're actually not, because your brain is still focused and working, and you're still getting those cortisol hits. So to really relax at night, and I don't want to take anybody's, like, TV or Instagram and social media time away, but you might want to give yourself a little bit of a boundary around how much you're using it, because a lot of times people will say, well, I don't have time to meditate, I don't have time to exercise, I don't have time to cook for myself. And then as we kind of, like, look at their schedule, and you can do this through, like, there's a bunch of free apps, I wrote some of them down, like Todoist, Clocktify, free apps where you can figure out where your time is, and then start to implement these small little changes that are going to be good for you. And I think everybody knows what's good for them. It's just that it's so hard to make those changes, but making them small and, like, kind of consistently, that's, like, what's really going to, like, move the needle and help you to feel a bit better.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So anything else that you think would be helpful?
I mean, we can keep going, but
Oh, we can. Oh, okay. I just thought we only had a half an hour.
yes, we do. But what I mean is, we can do another episode.
I would love to, because one of the things that I would love to talk about, because I was like, oh wow, the last time when we did this, I kind of went on a few tangents, and a part of that is because we're so complicated as human beings, right?
Yeah.
So, like, to say in an hour, half an hour, this is how you can go from, being burnt out and overwhelmed to being balanced. Very challenging to do that, because there's so many different things that are kind of going into this. And so I think it's so important to recognize that. So I definitely would love to do an episode around, like, values and moving towards your values. There is a particular type of treatment that I actually really love, and it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. Have you heard of it before?
No.
Okay. So it's actually was created by this man. He's a PhD, I think, in psychology. His name is Stephen Hayes, and it's called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, so ACT. And it's all about accepting kind of where you are, your life, things that have happened to you, and then kind of committing towards where you want your life to be and your values. And so a big part of the work that I do with employees and with companies is aligning their values with themselves internally, and then also with the company that they work for, because it's so important. Because you can have a value, when you sit down and you think about, well, I want to have a value of being like healthy. That's one of my values, is to be healthy. You start like thinking about your life and you're like, well, wait a minute. Am I doing things that are really healthy for me? Well, I'm staying up and I'm watching Love is Blind all night long. And I really should be going to bed, by 11 o'clock, for example. Not to say that this is what I'm doing, but say I have to get 8 hours of sleep, I have to wake up at 6 o'clock. That means I need to go to bed earlier than 11. So how am I what am I doing that's not healthy for me? So then I say, oh, okay, well, I'm watching this television show that really has no consequence on my life. And a lot of these shows that we watch really don't. I mean, they're entertaining and they are kind of mind numbing and a little bit relaxing. Sometimes it's nice to see people who are like car wrecks, because then you can say to your life, oh, wow, my life isn't so crazy like that. So, so really kind of understanding like where we are and what we're trying and what our values are and what are we doing that are not in alignment with that, and then reminding ourselves of that. So I really would love to talk about that. But I think for today, it is really just again, from what we talked about, building awareness as to where the stress is coming from, and how it's impacting you, and then building a routine in the morning to help set you so that you are feeling like you're easing into the day, you're in that rest and relaxation state. And maybe, at work, you're going to probably be a bit stressed. What could you do at work? Like, what kind of breaks can you make or take, where you could maybe go for a walk in the morning, and then maybe in the afternoon you take a little bit of a nap if you don't have time to do that. There are lots of different kind of meditations you can do and mindfulness practices that you can do, where you're just for 5 minutes, looking out the window, and you're kind of calming your nervous system down by looking out the window. Because we do also know that our nervous system is the direct way to get at our nervous system is really through two ways, is through our breathing and using our breathing to calm ourselves down. And so a lot of that meditation and that movement stuff helps to do that. And then the other way actually is through our eyesight. And our eyesight, when we're narrowly focused onto something, it actually puts us more in that fight or flight. And because we're looking at our phone, and when you look at your phone, what happens? You're narrowly looking at it, and you're not widening your view, and your brain and your body is thinking that you're in a fight or flight. So just even looking out the window and opening up your view helps your nervous system to calm down. And that's, that's also really important to understand, is a lot of this is you can't really think yourself out of it. You can't say, I'm not going to be stressed anymore. It really is these physical practices that you do to kind of help your body feel more relaxed, and that helps your brain feel relaxed. So it's kind of like a bottom up, because it is hard to force your brain to feel calm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, we will continue next week on Wednesday, if that works for you.
Yeah. Yes, I love these. Thank you for doing them.
Well, thanks to you, because you give a wealth of knowledge and so many great tips. Oh, and also all the resources that you mentioned. Give me a list of those so I can include those in the show notes.
Yes, I will. Yep, I have all of them written right here. So I will definitely give you that. Yeah.
Victoria, thank you so much. We will be back next week at the same time at 4 o'clock Eastern.
Yep, sounds good. Take care.
All right. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye.
Thanks for watching Circle Back to You podcast. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.